So, the quick and dirty truth of it all is that healing hurts. Healing hurts. There's that popular saying of before it gets better, it gets worse. And that's true for many things, but it's also true for recovery after a heartbreak. So I went through a breakup October of last year, and it was pretty devastating. Nothing traumatic happened, but it felt really traumatic to go through, and I'll explain why in just a bit. But a few months after I had gone through my breakup, my baby sister, she went through a breakup as well, and she had, called her big sister, because she wanted to know, like, how long did it take you to start feeling better? And I gave her the truth. It wasn't a pretty truth, but I told her, I was like, it sucked for a while. It sucked for a few months. And she was like, her answer to me was, I ain't got a few months to be sad. And, she went on, and despite my advice, she ended up in a situation with someone else a few months later. And, I warned her, but at 21, you know everything. So I didn't dare go down that rabbit hole. But for those of us who know that we got some things in our hearts that we need to heal from, I guess this conversation is more for you. So just to give a little bit of background, after my last breakup, I was devastated. This breakup was different just because of where I was in my life. And I knew that after that breakup, that breakup was about, the feelings that I felt after that breakup was about way more than him and the actual ending of our relationship and what he did. And it had a lot to do with just like all of the buildup that was in my heart at the time. And when we broke up, I just remember having these feelings that I didn't quite understand, and I sat with them for a while, and I didn't rush to be in a relationship with someone else. I said, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through the uglies, and I'm going to do that with me and my BFF Jesus. I had, rededicated my life to God, and I was going to do this with him. And God really just started to unpack my heart and just begin to show me what was what was underneath some of the feelings that I was experiencing surrounding this breakup. And I remember feeling like abandoned. So our relationship, it ended for a few different reasons, but the biggest thing was his job was moving him to Florida, and neither of us wanted to be in a long distance relationship. And so for me, I just felt abandoned. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like if I was good enough, he would have stayed. And but it's funny because throughout the course of our relationship, he never did anything that made me feel those things. Those were just things that were blocking up my own heart, that when he left, that's what I attributed that to. And I really struggled with trying to figure out like where that had come from. And at 31, we like to forget about our daddy issues that we struggled from. But I just realized that like this daddy issue, even though I'd had at that point, I have a good relationship with my father, I didn't really realize the fact that when my parents divorced, my father left Southern California and moved back up to the Bay Area, which meant I didn't see him often. He missed a lot of the really important things in my life. The first time a boy made fun of me or hurt my feelings, my dad wasn't there. My dad wasn't there to reinforce me. I had my older brothers, and they were great, but it's something about a father and what he does to his daughter to build her self-esteem and confidence. And I didn't have that. And my ex leaving reminded me of those feelings of my dad leaving and not staying, and why wasn't I good enough for him to stay? But I was able to come to that realization because I wasn't so quick to jump into another relationship with someone else. Like I had that revelation while I was stewing in my funk, in my feelings, and I told that long story just to talk about some of some of the mistakes that we make and things we don't do, that we probably should do when we experience heartache, of any sort. And the first thing is, like, you gotta give yourself time to understand what just happened and why you feel the way that you do. Because a lot of the times you think it's we broke up, but it's really something else. Just like I explained, like I was suffering with abandonment issues and feeling abandoned by my dad. That was the underlying thing. That's what made that so rough. And I just completely lost my train of thought. Let's see, understanding what happened and making sense of the way that you feel. The Bible says in Jeremiah, I think 17:9, that the heart is deceitful, who can understand it? That's why it's so important to stop and be still and take some time to understand what it is that you just went through and what your heart is really telling you. Because sometimes we think it's one thing and it's really completely different. Like, I thought I was just sad because we broke up, but I was really dealing with abandonment issues that were not there, that weren't even reinforced by him inside of the relationship. It was something that I had brought with me into that relationship. And when he left, it was just a reinforcement of what my heart already tells me, the brokenness that was already inside of my heart. The second thing is, stop rushing to feel better. I knew that it was gonna suck for a while, and I became okay with that. I journaled more, I spoke to God more, I trusted in wise counsel, which at the time was just one person. Shout out to Carolyn, because I talked to her all the time, and I shared with her all kind of uglies that I was going through, because I just wanted my heart to be back at a neutral place. Like, I wanted to love for the right reasons and not love with so much hurt. I didn't want to love out of a necessity. Like, I didn't want to be with someone because I needed them to need me, or I needed them. I wanted to love them because we're built for love. That's the way God made us. Like, we're built to love each other. And I didn't want to love out of necessity or insecurity. And so I was willing to stop dating, to take the time to be by myself, to understand what I was going through. And then the final thing, and let me not say final to make it sound like there's like these 12 steps, but another good thing that I would recommend is avoiding this, whatever got you into that situation. Avoid that. I know earlier today I posted on Facebook about, how when you re-injure your foot or your leg, you're in a cast for a period of time so that you're staying off of it. And then once you come out of the cast, you end up in physical therapy of some sort, right? Trying to regain strength in that place where it was once broken. You're trying to let that part function as it did before the injury. And then eventually you start adding back, your exercises or whatever it is that you usually do. You slowly begin to add those things back, but you always move around knowing, hey, this was once injured, and if I'm not careful, it could be injured again. And we want to do that same thing with our hearts. We want to put it in a cast for a little bit, not cutting off the world, because sometimes we go off the deep end with that too, where we'll put our heart in a box inside of a case, inside of some cement, and then we'll put a lock on. Like, it's too much. Like, where we cannot let anyone else in, but we also can't get that hurt out of it because we have put our heart in prison. And that's not what I mean. I just mean avoiding whatever it was, whatever unhealthy things you let slide or didn't pay enough attention to, whatever things you did. Those are the things that I say, avoid it. They say, I've never broken a bone, but they say that, when you re-injure something that was once injured, it's even more painful than the initial injury. And I never experienced that. I would take it as true because it's the same thing with our hearts. When we get our hearts broken and then we rush into another situation and then that situation ends again, we now have the hurt from this new situation compiled on with the hurt from that old situation, and our heart is just sinking. And so, that's why we want to make sure that we're taking the time, we're stopping, we're not serial dating. I was a victim. Let me not even say a victim, because I was doing it myself, but I was once a serial dater. And, I would date and I'd be like, something wrong with him. I don't like the way he chew. I don't like, let's try someone else. Let me go. And no matter who I dated, it always ended up the same, piecing them out, because it wasn't necessarily them. I mean, sometimes it was, but it was the lens that I was looking through. Like, my lens was cracked because I wasn't whole. So the lens I was looking through, no matter what that person came with, a man told me very recently, he was like, if I would have met you back in 2014, you would be married by now. And I just laughed, and I'm like, that's cute. And I was like, no, you would have been run off just like the rest of them. Trust me. Like, even though the most persistent man has been ran off by me, and it's not, it was unintentional, but because I was so broken and I didn't really even realize it because I never stopped to take the time. I just kept on moving and shaking, and then one hurt and one rejection after another, and one no and one you're not good enough. It just all began to pile up, and I kept that inside, and I would get into these relationships and I would expect that person to make me feel better, make me feel good enough, make me feel whole. But we already know that by the grace of God, we are complete through Christ. And so I was looking for man to do what man was never intended to do for me. And that's exhausting. And that gets tiring. As someone who has done it to someone else, and as someone who has had it done to them, eventually it gets old. Because that's not someone else's burden to bury. And they're not going to want to deal with that forever. So we have to, like, our hearts and our happiness have to be our responsibilities, and we have to fight for it, and we have to be okay with being in pain a little while so that it can get better. Like, think about it when you were younger and you used to get, like, the scrape on your arm. What would your mom do? She would go put that alcohol patch that would burn, and you'd think she's trying to kill you, but no, she's trying to keep the infection out so that it can scab up and heal. And it's the exact same way. Be bold enough, be strong enough to allow your heart the time to heal. Go through the uglies. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. So figure out what's going on in there. Your heart is telling you something. There's something that needs to be healed. And it's not, like, healing is a process, and just because it hurts doesn't mean you're not healing. That's a part of the process. So you have to go through the pain. You have to go through the days where you feel ugly, when you feel ashamed, when you feel, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed that I feel it. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's a part of the process. And here I am a year later. I wouldn't say that I have reached complete healing, but I will say that I'm whole. Like, I understand the way that I am made, and I understand the way that my heart was made to love. And it's in a healthier place, and I identify, it's easier for me to identify what unhealthy love looks like because I took myself out of it and really began to understand it. So when I see certain posts, when people tell me certain things, like, I understand that where they're coming from because I've been through it, but it's not something that I'm willing to get myself back into. But I never would have been able, I've never would have been able to come to this place of wholeness, of identifying hurt, if I never would have stopped and taken the time and taken the responsibility for my happiness and the wholeness of my heart. And so this was really longer than what I had anticipated, but I just really felt compelled to have this discussion because I see so many posts and I see so many things that it's just like, wow, if you really understood the condition of your heart, stop saying, he completes me, because he doesn't, or he shouldn't. Stop looking for someone else to complete you. Stop needing to be with someone all the time. I just saw a post that said that the relationship goals was for us to love being with each other so much that we miss each other even when we're around each other. That's dependency, and that's not love, and it's not healthy. So I just encourage you, do the work. It's hard sometimes. It's painful. It's not a pretty, sexy process. I wish that I could tell you that every day was going to be rainbows and butterflies, but it's not. But what I can say is that it's worth it. Your heart will thank you later. The relationships that you're in from that point on, they will thank you. You'll be a better brother, mother, sister, daughter, friend, whatever you are, lover. You will be a better version of yourself. So the love that you can give to other people will be more whole and more authentic and less dependent. And so I'm gonna stop now because I would just go on and talking about this forever. But be blessed, have a great night, and love yourself and heal yourself, or let God heal you.